Up to 1937, Hitler would only take one secretary with him on his travels, either Fräulein Wolf or myself. Our private life was very curtailed, and existed only when the opportunity for it occurred. Even when officially off duty, we had to leave a phone number where we could be reached. Hitler knew that he weighed us down with work, but did not care to enlarge the pool of secretaries, because he could not stand having new faces around him. For this reason, we had almost no personal freedom, and were on call day and night. Once in the train to Hamburg, I was ordered by radio message to take the next train back. On another occasion, sitting in the stands on the Odeonplatz during the October festival, I heard a loudspeaker announcement: Fräulein Schröder should report immediately to the Prinzregentenplatz, Hitler's flat. Even when I was taking the cure, I was often recalled just to take a single dictation. Hitler's principle of keeping a plan secret to the last possible moment kept us under constant pressure. The trips and excursions were probably always arranged well ahead, but Hitler would only announce the time of departure at the last minute. During the long period of waiting for the announcement, we would always be on tenterhooks. If someone ever passed a remark about how little free time he left us, however, Hitler would put on his surprised face and assure them, "I allow everybody in my circle their freedom." But in reality, he would not tolerate anybody daring to go their own way. When I was confined for several weeks at the Berlin University Clinic in 1938, Hitler visited me the day before Christmas Eve in company with Dr. Brandt and his chief adjutant Brückner. He presented me with a bouquet of long-stemmed pink roses, which it was his custom to send, and a book with his dedication written on the flyleaf. In good humour, he told me that, as he got out of the car in front of the women's clinic in the Seigelstrasse, a small crowd gathered. "Everyone who saw me go through the women's clinic will definitely think I am visiting a friend. I got pregnant." He smiled. He pressurized the senior surgeon, Dr. Stuckel, into promising to do all he could to get me well again, because he needed me urgently. At that time, I was certainly his number one stenotyist. All his secretaries had a time when they were in with Hitler. I was in until 1941, too, a little after the invasion of Russia. In 1937, a new secretary joined us, and now I shared Hitler's favour with Gerda Daranowski, who had previously worked at the private chancellery. Sometimes she had been called to the personal adjutancy to take down speeches because my colleague Johanna Wolf was often off work sick. Now she transferred in permanently. She was a young Berliner, not only very capable, but attractive and always well-humoured, and knew how to goad Hitler into talking at tea, in the staircase room, and when travelling in the Mercedes. From her work with Elizabeth Arden, Dara, as we called her, knew how to give her face just the right look to excite a man. Hitler was delighted by her skill with cosmetics, and would pay her the most unfettered compliments. Since I was very economic with makeup, he once glanced at me, probably hinting that I should give myself a beauty spot. "And Schröder has the intelligence of an above-average man." Receiving the same treatment, we were a good team in those years. Dara and I accompanied Hitler on his journey to Austria at the annexation in March 1938. After 1945, it was loudly asserted that Hitler had dragged Austria home into the Reich against the will of the people. That was not the impression I received when I saw the enthusiasm with which Hitler and the Wehrmacht were greeted in Austria. The almost hysterical outbursts of joy got on one's nerves. I remember particularly the people of Linz who crowded before the Hotel Weinzinger until the late hours chanting "Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer," and the ending chorus pleading for Hitler to show himself at the hotel window. And Hitler showed himself, again and again. When the enthusiasm had not abated by midnight, the SS Begleitkommando was told to ask for quiet and get the crowd to disperse. After that, it gradually grew quieter. It was still quiet next morning. This did not seem right to Hitler. When he left the hotel to no ovation, he was clearly annoyed. Schaub whispered to me, "He needs the shout of jubilation, just like the artiste does his applause." From Linz we drove back to the Hotel Imperial in Vienna. Hitler did not occupy the VIP suite. He used this only for official purposes, but had instead a small apartment on the first floor decorated in the Schönbrunn Baroque and completed with a magnificent floral arrangement. The most glorious bouquets of flowers were handed in at reception for Hitler, typical Viennese sprays of white lilies and pink roses, and the most precious orchids. It was overwhelming. Dara and I took only the rare orchids and put them in the Mercedes for the drive back because they lasted the longest. The car was a sea of blooms. Thousands of Viennese waited outside the hotel, never tiring of calling for Hitler to emerge and speak. Next day, Cardinal Innitzer visited Hitler at the hotel. Hitler was very impressed by this visit and kept referring to it during our conversation at tea. On our return to Berlin, the jubilation of the population was deafening. Hitler Youth had strewn the Wilhelmplatz with flowers, draping them from the treetops. They waved flags and applauded loudly as Hitler drove past. It was all rather too much for me. We had to endure similar receptions in 1938 on the return from Italy, in 1939 from Prague, and later following the successful military campaigns in Poland and France, when Hitler was at the peak of his power. Between 2 and 9th of May 1938, I was the only secretary in the Führer's special train for the state visit to Italy. My colleague Johanna Wolf was on Rudolf Hess's special train for the trip to Rome. She was attached temporarily to his staff. My younger colleague Gerda Daranowski came by plane. Johanna Wolf and I stayed in the Quirinal in rooms between the ground and first floors apparently meant for staff. I remember the wood-framed bay windows, which went almost to the floor. We were cared for by a round signora dressed in black, who curtsied whenever she spoke to us, and tended our needs. We were served exquisite vegetable dishes, prepared with oil and easily digestible. We saw nothing of the parades in Rome held in Hitler's honour, but once we were driven by the chauffeur of Italian Crown Prince Umberto to Tivoli to see the wonderful gardens of the Villa d'Este. The Vatican was closed probably because of Hitler's visit, but there was so much to see in Rome that Dara and I decided not to go to Naples for the naval review, and went instead to Florence because the journey home was to begin there. As we strolled the Ponte Vecchio, a coach containing the Duce and Hitler, and drawn by the finest horses, came towards us. We waved, laughed, and saluted. Hitler used to say of this encounter later, "I was just about to say to the Duce what beautiful women there are in Florence when I recognised my secretaries." Scarcely had Hitler's special train steamed out of Florence for the journey home, than Hitler was dictating telegrams thanking the Italian king and the Duce. Ribbentrop was watching him. Hitler said, "If you can find a better way of putting it, then change the text." Ribbentrop then redictated the telegrams at least 10 times, but despite his best endeavours in the end, he settled for the text Hitler had had in the first place. The Italian visit was the main topic in many subsequent conversations, both in the positive and negative sense. Hitler had been inspired by Italian art, the buildings and military parades, less so by the court ceremonial. Hitler found the dryness and arrogance of the nobility a challenge to his self-control. The Duce did not have the same leading role in Italy as Hitler did in Germany and had no influence on the protocol. The demeaning treatment those courtesans handed down to the Duce outraged Hitler. As he said, he had to suppress his instincts to break off the state visit prematurely because of the way in which Mussolini was continually humiliated. During the military parade in Rome, seats had been reserved for the members of the royal house and for Hitler, while Mussolini was forced to stand the whole time. That made me so indignant that I almost made a public fuss. "Only for the Duce's sake did I exercise restraint," he said. The basis for his grudge against the Italians was founded in Rome on this visit, and not later by the surprises which they had in store for him in the war. Shortly before Czechoslovakia was incorporated into the Reich in 1939, the Czech state president, Hácha, came to Berlin for a conference. The talks took place on the night of 14th March 1939 in Hitler's large study at the new Reich Chancellery. Before Hacha was ushered in, Gerda Daranowski and I had to sit in a small office concealed by a door behind Hitler's desk. We were to hold ourselves in immediate readiness should dictation be necessary during the conversation. We sat, and the hours went by. Shortly after Mauvoir 30, the door opened at last, and Hitler swept over the step, a happy expression on his face. Standing in the centre of the room, he said, exuding a superabundance of endless joy. "So, children, now there and there," pointing to his left and right cheeks, "each of you give me a kiss." Since he had never made such a request of us before, we were rather taken aback, but gathered ourselves and complied warmly with his wish. "This is the finest day of my life," he went on. "I have achieved something which has been striven for in vain for centuries. I have succeeded in unifying Czechoslovakia with the Reich. Hacha has signed the treaty. I shall go down in history as the greatest German." Just a couple of hours later, we were aboard Hitler's special train and heading for Czechoslovakia. We got out at Lipa in Bohemia, where the great convoy of Mercedes from Hitler's vehicle park was already waiting. Then we drove for Prague, past endless columns of German soldiers. Snow whirled around us, but Hitler ignored it. Most of the time he stood up in the Mercedes, saluting. In Prague we went to the Hradčin fortress, like a fairy tale castle set deep in snow above the houses of the city. Something was not right. The great wrought iron gates were shut, and the SS bodyguard had to get out and open them, for me a clear sign that we were not welcome. Inside the Hradčin, it was like an army camp. In collaboration with Interior Minister Frick and Secretary of State Stuckart, Hitler worked until late in the night preparing decrees which he dictated to me at the typewriter. It was so hectic that I failed to notice the photographers there. Many years later, I chanced across a photo of myself, which appeared at the head of a series of Christa Schroeder exclusive articles in Corriere della Sera. It was difficult for the Czech officials in the Hradčin to hide their hatred for us. No wonder. They found it impossible even to offer us a snack, and about 2 a.m, the SS bodyguard went to the Deutscher's house in Prague and rustled up some white bread, ham and pilsner. We did the food justice and praised the icy cold beer. This made Hitler curious, and he asked for a glass. He did not like the beer, however, for he pulled a face and said that it was too bitter for him. We returned to Berlin on the Führer train on 19th March, my birthday, and Hitler invited his closest staff to a celebratory coffee afternoon in the saloon coach. He was in the best of spirits and presented me with a bouquet of long-stemmed roses, which he had ordered by wire to be sent to a station along the way. He also gave me the present of a gold pen holder and pencil engraved with the date and his name. In 1946, this gift gave pleasure to some American souvenir hunter in the Mannheim-Seckenheim internment camp. From 1939 onwards, we did more travelling. In contrast to earlier years, when Hitler nearly always went by car, now he began to extol the greater comfort of his pleasant, tastefully furbished special train. It became his habit on these journeys to invite his intimate staff to the saloon coach in the afternoon and evening, when meals and tea would be taken. His female secretaries were never overlooked. If one or other of us slipped away to avoid one of these sessions, often hours long, he would mount an inquiry into her whereabouts, and the manservant distributing the invitations soon learned not to accept no for an answer. Accordingly, I spent a great deal of my existence in the saloon coach of the Führer train. The coach was mahogany panelled, with a large rectangular table, red leather chairs and indirect lighting. A gramophone and radio were on hand. When stopped at stations, the signals crew hooked into the telephone network, or telegraphic messages could be sent. On these train journeys, Hitler would insist on having the curtains drawn in the saloon coach, even in blinding sunshine. He wanted only electric light, because he found bright sunshine unpleasant. Possibly he also liked Dara's makeup better under artificial light. He was forever paying her compliments, which led to the Hitler impersonators amongst the officers staging their usual impressions once Hitler had retired. During conversations on the train, Hitler liked to talk about car travel. He only used the special train because it was so comfortable. He liked being driven across Germany in the car, not only because it was quicker, but also because it gave him a chance to meet the common people close up. Hitler, the fanatical car enthusiast, had suggested various improvements which found approval with Daimler-Benz. Its Director General, Jakob Werlin, had let him have a car on credit during the period of struggle, which hawkers had declined to do, and so Hitler was especially indebted to him. He once joked to Werlin, "By the way, do you know that you are the true conqueror of Germany? If you had not given me a car, then, it would have been impossible for me to have been it. Therefore, you are the true conqueror. You should consider whether you have any demands to make." Werlin, who came into the sleeper coach where I was smoking a cigarette in the corridor, said to me, "Fräulein Schröder, did you hear what the Führer said? I must tell my mother that." In the pre-war years, Hitler's birthdays would begin with a serenade by the band of the SS Leibstandarte. When Hitler then descended the staircase from his first-floor apartment in the Radziwill Palace, he would be greeted by a host of ministers and adjutants' children in their party, best holding colourful posies. Hitler, evidently, enjoyed taking his breakfast with the children, and for the photographers, the table scenes were a welcome opportunity. The official chorus of congratulations would follow, and then would come the Wehrmacht parade in the Tiergartenstrasse. The historical Congress Hall, which separated Hitler's apartment on the first floor from the service rooms of the Reich Chancellery, would have been cleared a few weeks before 20th April. The presents received would be stacked on the long negotiating table, and additional tables brought in for the purpose, if necessary. The scent of small almond trees, carnations and roses would perfume the room. There was the widest range of presents imaginable, valuable, useful, beautiful, artistic. Paintings, sculptures, candelabras, carpets, old weapons, rare coins, clocks, accessories for the writing desk, briefcases, books, music scores, and much more. Then the handicrafts, pillows and blankets with National Socialist symbols, or legends such as Heil mein Führer. How many thoughts from fanatical, adoring women had been woven into this handiwork? Mountains of baby clothes, bed sheets and blankets finished up later in the archive room of the private chancellery to be carefully sorted for distribution to needy families. Cakes with artistic structures and inscriptions, baskets of delicacies, and more or less all the edible stuff were sent on Hitler's order to hospitals. Valuable items ended up in the showcases and cabinets of the Führer flats, handicrafts without National Socialist emblems in visitors' rooms. Later in the war, field grey socks knitted by women of the Nazi women's organisations were piled into great mountains in the four corners of the Congress Hall. In the 1950s, my friend Johanna Nusser in Berlin returned to me the letters I had written her from the Berghof and Führer HQs during the war. The following extracts are taken from them. In a moment of thoughtlessness, I made some of them available to David Irving. The opinions they express about the Russian mentality I had assimilated from conversations with Hitler and repeated in chat. Nowadays, I am horrified at these opinions of Hitler, which I thoughtlessly passed on. How could I pass judgment on people whom I never had the opportunity to know firsthand? I am blameworthy, but I let the material stand. Letter from Berlin, 21st April 1939. All my plans to take the cure and convalesce have come to naught again. I wanted to go in March, and when that was not possible, in April. That is now out of the question, and for the time being I have given up. We have a Reichstag speech on 28th of the month, and until then we are on standby for all eventualities. Dara has been in Munich since last week. I had hoped that Wolfen, Johanna Wolf, would be coming to Berlin, but meanwhile the boss has told her to stay in Munich to catalogue the birthday presents he received and write letters of thanks for them. I have no choice but to wait for the Reichstag speech and see how the general situation looks afterwards. Meanwhile, I have put on a lot of weight. It is really ghastly. If only I had half the willpower of the boss in this respect, it would help. As soon as he puts on a few pounds, he cuts out this and that, at a stroke, goes hungry for 3 weeks and loses it all. The birthday was very tiring for him. It lasted for 2 days, reception after reception. The parade yesterday was fairly large and went on and on. We left at 09:30 and got back to the office at 16:30, 7 hours split by 3 hours drive and waiting time, and 4 hours march past. I expect you will see it on the cinema newsreels. It is simply amazing to me where he gets the strength from. Hours without a break standing and saluting are damn tiring. Just watching we got dog-tired. Or I was, at least. The number and value of the presents this year is staggering. Paintings, De Frege, Waldmüller, Lenbach, even a glorious Titian, then wonderful Meissen sculptures in porcelain, silver table and centerpieces, magnificent books, vases, drawings, carpets, handicrafts, globes, radios, watches, etc. Then crates of eggs, huge cakes, boxes of sweets, fruit juice, liquor, a marvellous sailing ship made from fresh blooms, sad that it will soon wither. Then aircraft and ship models and similar military items which give him the greatest pleasure. He is like a kid with them. The Berliners made a day of it as usual and were on their legs from dawn to dusk. The Charlottenburg Boulevard, which is very wide and has fine solid lamp standards, was wonderful, although like Unter den Linden I found the bunting a bit too theatrical. When these theatre requisites are taken down the street, we'll be back to normal and more imposing than it is now. The Linden has too many of those advertising columns, but perhaps I have no taste, and it is actually beautiful. Most people seem to approve of it. Before we came back to Berlin, we were in Austria to review the troops. The boss went off in the car, leaving us in the special train for 3 or 4 hours, just 7 kilometers from Vienna. By the way, he calls the train the Hotel of the Frenetic Reich Chancellor. Recently I have seen some fine theatrical performances and have been mainly in Munich. I never really know where to go in the evenings, and so I have made a habit of attending the chamber plays in the theatre house, where almost everything I have seen to date has been wonderfully staged and acted. I have seen, for example, A Glorious Anthony and Cleopatra, and a short while ago, during Festival Week, Conspiracy and Love. I had wanted to see the latter for a long time, but could never get to it in Berlin. It is booked well in advance there, and the boss had said one should only see it in Berlin, where the setting is fabulous and the casting first class. For example, the old city musician Miller with Heinrich George. The old man has been giving very interesting talks recently in the evenings about the church question. Everything was so clear and straightforward that I regret not having made a note of it. He does not like the Gothic style of architecture because it is strange and unnatural. That is obviously a matter of taste. Why suddenly interrupt a naturally fine arch to rise to an unnecessary and senseless point? He asks. And why the many towers and turrets, only there for the eye, inaccessible and blocked off inside? Christian mysticism had its origins in the era of the Goths. The dark interior of the buildings favoured it. The period was one of darkness and prudery. The female body, abdomen and everything, hidden. An unmarried painter would never have seen a naked female. Hence the false and ugly representations. In that era, fables and mysticism would have spread very rapidly. Christianity is based on knowledge 2,000 years old, and this knowledge is confused and layered with mysticism and biblical fable. The question is, why should it not be possible to base Christianity on our modern knowledge? Luther had attempted to introduce the Reformation, but he had been misunderstood. For the Reformation was not a single event, but eternally progressive reform. No standing still, but advancing together, developing together, etc. The boss knows, of course, that the church question is very complicated, and should war come, could have very unfavourable effects internally. I have the impression he would be happy to see it resolved in a dignified manner. There is very much more of which I have to unburden my heart to you. For example, I have come to realize that there is a big difference in character between my younger colleague and myself. She is too interested in pleasing at all cost, and for this purpose, anything goes. I have got used to her passing off my opinions on books as her own, and my beliefs about this or that problem, after half an hour, even in my presence, quite openly claiming them to be the product of her own mind. The balloon went up on our last stay at the Berg when she started to speak for me, i.e. when somebody asked me something directly, she got her oar in first and answered on my behalf before I had a chance to open my mouth. If it had been on office matters, it would not have bothered me, but these were the most private things. Or if I was sitting with somebody in serious conversation, she had to come along and butt in with loud comments and so ruin everything. Then, in all her glory in the "I'm convinced of it" type of superior tone, she came out with so many well stretched out "isn't it's" and "don't you agrees" that I got furious. Since then, I have been very reserved and only speak to her if I have to. The worst thing is that the boss is very taken with her, and she naturally used that to her advantage. You know yourself best how unpleasant such things can get. So, life is an eternal struggle to get my own point across, and that I do not like. It is the case today that men, and particularly those here, like to have around them pretty nicely made up, young, totally unproblematical heads. No trouble from a serious face, thank you. On the Berg recently, I had enough of it. But then I told myself, I cannot just throw in the towel. I cannot start all over again. And in any case, you meet struggles and resistance wherever you go. I shall just be glad when it is over at least, and I can pack my bags and take the cure. On 1st September 1939, the war with Poland came as a surprise for us all, and at 2100 on the evening of 3rd of September, we left Berlin in Hitler's special train for Poland. As usual, we had been given no time to make preparations for the journey. In a couple of hours we are leaving Berlin, I wrote to my friend on the afternoon of the 3rd of September. First of all, receive a hello from me. Now I have to go through thick and thin with the boss. That it could be the thing I do not like to think, but if so, then life has nothing more for me. When you write, please do so to the address at the head of this letter. I will reply from the same. At the beginning of the Polish campaign, Hitler directed operations from his special train in the vicinity of Gogolin. Every morning he was driven to the front to visit the most forward lines. In the evening he would return covered in muck and dust. Before leaving again, he would dictate exhortations and orders of the day to his troops. During the siege of Warsaw, he made appeals to the population to abandon the city. Only towards the end of the campaign did he set up his HQ in the Casino Hotel at Zoppo. Letter from FHQ, Poland, 11th of September 1939. We have been living in the Führer train for 10 days, continually changing sidings, but since we, Dara and I, never leave the train, it is very monotonous. The heat is almost insufferable, simply frightful. The sun beats down all day on the roof, and one is powerless against the tropical type heat. I have got really fat, simply ghastly. In addition, the worst is that one cannot do anything useful. It is always the same. The boss leaves in the morning with his officers in the car, and we are condemned to wait and wait. We have done everything possible to help out somewhere, but it is simply impossible because we do not stay long enough in one place. Recently, we spent a night near a transit dressing station. A big transport came along full of wounded. Dr. Brandt was operating all night. Our people from the SS bodyguard helped out. We, Dara and I, offered to write letters for the wounded to their next of kin, and were hoping to be able to help out a little in this way. But once again, it was turned down. The senior surgeon was very pleased and thanked us, but since it is only a transit unit, our offer was inconvenient. How envious I was to hear about your coal shovelling. I would like to have been there. At least one can see what role one is playing. Our people who went into Poland with the boss can naturally see what is going on, but it is not safe because they often come under fire from ambushes. They cannot convince the boss not to stand up in the car as he does in Germany, not even in the most exposed areas. I think it is crazy, but he will not listen. The first day they drove through a wood infested with partisans. Half an hour before, an unarmed German medical team had been wiped out. The single survivor managed to escape to tell the story. Polish aircraft were bombing not far away. It is assumed that the Poles saw the Führer convoy. Visible to all and sundry, the boss stood on a hilltop. The soldiers ran towards him from all directions shouting, "Heil!" And the Polish artillery was in the valley. They obviously saw the crowd forming, and, since it is no secret that the Führer is spending time at the front, it was not too difficult for them to guess who was there. Half an hour later, their aircraft dropped bombs near him. It is, of course, a great incentive for the forces and has a colossal effect for morale to see the Führer in the danger zone. All the same, in my opinion, the danger is too great. I am very interested to see how the business with the British and French develops. I hope that the French will soon see that it is not worth the price to sacrifice millions of people for Britain. If the thing with Poland is over with quickly, this will take the carpet out from under their feet. Or at least, that is how I see it. One of the orderlies died suddenly the day before yesterday of meningitis, the same disease which claimed the Führer's driver, if you remember Shrek. I heard some SS comrades say that he was only 24. It would have been better for him to have fallen in the field. But one cannot pick and choose the way one is to die. There are many we know amongst the dead. The brother of Hans Junge, who was with the Leibstandarte, has also fallen. On 26th September 1939, we returned to Berlin. Hitler had many conferences with the military in April and May 1940, but none of the contents seeped through into the staircase room. There was only a suspicion that something was in the wind. On the afternoon of 9 May in 1940, we, the inner circle, were told to prepare to travel the same evening. The destination was not disclosed, nor could we discover how long we might be away. In response to my inquiry in this respect to Obergruppenführer Schaub, he said in a manner both secretive and showy, "It could be 8 days, it could be 14 days, it could be a month, but there again it could be years." Towards evening we assembled in the Führer apartment and received the order for the off. Seated in a car with my colleague Daranowski and the representative of the Reich press chief 55, we were driven out of Berlin towards Starken, leading us to assume that we would be flying from the airport. That was not the case, for the car drove on past Starken and eventually pulled into the forecourt of a small railway station where the Führer train stood waiting. Apart from the military adjutants, nobody seemed to know where we were supposed to be going. It was all very mysterious. At dinner in the dining car, Schmunt 56 joked, "Have you all got your seasick pills?" Was he hinting that we were going to Norway? The train was steaming north? Hitler chipped in, "If you are good, you might be able to bring home a sealskin as a trophy." After midnight, past Hanover, the train was suddenly switched to the westbound tracks, although this was only noticed by the alert few. 57. Towards dawn, we drew into a small station from which the name shields had been dismounted. We left the train and continued our journey in 3-axled open Mercedes cars. In all the villages through which we drove, the street signs had been replaced by yellow shields with military designations. Finally, we finished up in a hilly, wooded region before a regimental command bunker, which the boss had claimed for his HQ. As we stood near this bunker at dawn, we could hear artillery fire in the distance. Hitler gestured with his hand towards the west and said, "Meine Herren, the offensive against the Western powers has just begun." It became clear that we were somewhere near Münstereifel. The FHQ was called Felsenest. The command post, bunker, was very small, with simple wooden walls and chairs of braided fibre. The room accommodated Hitler, Keitel, Jodl, Schmunt, Schaub, and one manservant, and there was a small dining room for a nucleus of the staff. All other staff members were given quarters in the nearby village. From the point of view of landscape, it was the best situated of all FHQs. The wood, fresh with spring, was filled with birdsong. Hitler called it the bird paradise. He felt very well in this region, and since his bunker room was very small, he held most of his conferences in the open air. He was never outdoors so often as he was here. He enthused frequently about the glorious scenery and made a plan to bring us all back on a commemorative visit every year once the war was over. On 5 or 6th of June 1940, the FHQ was transferred to Brûlis-de-Pêche, not far from Brussels, in order to be closer to the front. This was a village with an old church and a spacious, comfortable schoolhouse, set amongst fields in opulent bloom. Never again did I see fields of that kind, covered over so great an area, with such succulent margaritas, and skirted by a wood of wonderful primeval oaks. Letter, Brûlis-de-Pêche, 13th June 1940. We moved forward a week ago, and are now in a small village abandoned by its inhabitants. The first few nights I slept with a female colleague in a former pigsty, cowshed of wooden boards and stucco, dreadfully damp. Yesterday, thank God, they finished the barrack hut, and now we are living in the dry. The first few days we had no water, which gave me an insight into how essential this wet element is. We cleaned our teeth with soda water, not totally refreshing. On the first night we had a fire in our stall. The telephone and lighting wires were close together, and the damp started the fire. The hissing and crackling of the flames woke me up, and still half asleep, I tried to put it out with my bare hands. When that failed, I used a wet handkerchief and got a shock. The same happened with several of the officers. The cabling cooked all night, an uncomfortable feeling lying in bed below it. Anyway, at least the inconveniences are over, and we have settled in quite nicely. As to our successes, our troops have got as far as Forges, Paris aerodrome, from where I am writing this letter, but I doubt we shall be putting down roots here. Recently, I went through Sedan, Namur, Philippeville, Dinant, etc. There was much devastation, whole blocks of flats reduced to rubble. Even worse are the highways along the route of the advance, in ditches, right and left artillery, tanks, aircraft of all kinds, uniforms, ambulances, ammunition, etc., burnt out trucks. A sweetish odour of decomposition hangs above these towns, and above the whole thing great hordes of screeching ravens circle. A desolate picture of destruction. Cattle, horses, and dogs, all ownerless, wander between the gutted houses. In the first few days, when cows were not milked, we could hear them at night bellowing in pain. The refugees make a sad picture. Large families living in burnt-out cars, old ladies being pushed in children's perambulators. War is the most terrible thing there can be. Our boss does what he can for the poor people. Hilgenfeldt has been detailed to see to it. Every night we endure the same piece of theatre from above. Punctually at SO 200, the enemy aircraft come and circle the village for 3 hours. A few nights ago, they wrecked a house in which some of our RSD policemen were billeted. Thank God nobody was hurt. They took cover in time. We do not know if the aircraft were going for us or the highway. They are apparently invulnerable because they keep so high. If they fail to appear, the boss asks, "Where are our house aircraft tonight?" Every night we stand in the open with the boss and some staff officers until 0300 or 3:30, watching the nightly manoeuvres of the reconnaissance aircraft until they disappear with the dawn. The landscape reminds me of a picture by Caspar David Friedrich. The food is first class. We have enough butter and milk. We even get tomatoes and fruit now and again. We do not really go short of anything. Yesterday I was invited with Schaub to a slaughter party. About 20 minutes from here by car is our flight squadron, where the airmen had slaughtered 2 pigs. There were about 50 people gathered in a former clubhouse, almost certainly YMCA, seated at festively decorated tables illuminated by tall French paraffin lanterns. There was plentiful blood and liver sausage and a belly of pork. Later, a simply wonderful old French wine was served, not to mention the schnapps. So you see, I am not missing out on anything. For tomorrow evening, we are invited for pancakes with the RSD. They are billeted in farmhouses, eat at midday from the field kitchen, and in the evening have to forage for themselves. They have picked up a lot of housewifely talent, which they are naturally hoping to show off, hence our invitation tomorrow for pancakes. There is still so much to tell you, but which I cannot for the moment. The time is not so far away, however, when we can sit together comfortably. Personally, I do not believe that the war will last beyond June. Yesterday in Paris, General Reagan stated that the battle for Paris was lost and proposed a special peace in which Pétain supported him. Renault and others were violently opposed. Letter from FHQ Brûlis de Pêche, Wolfschlucht, 20th June 1940. The armistice came into force tonight at 1:35. How many mothers and wives will thank God that the war with France has ended so quickly? The boss will address the Reichstag briefly. Probably it will contain his final appeal to the British. If they will not quit, he said, he would go ahead ruthlessly. I believe that he is sorry to have to wrestle the British to the ground. He would apparently find it preferable if they would be reasonable about it. If only they knew that all the boss wants from them is our former colonies back, perhaps they would be more approachable. I am very interested to see how Britain will respond. By the way, Munich was lovely, great enthusiasm. Dara and I got a lot of surprised looks in our field grey costumes with the Deutsche Wehrmacht armbands. Meanwhile, the boss was in the room where he dictated the appeal for the newspapers. He composed the radio programme himself. Explaining why he had not destroyed the BEF at Dunkirk, Hitler told his intimate circle, "Their army is the backbone of Britain and the Empire. If we had destroyed the BEF, the Empire would follow. As we neither wish to be, nor can be, its successor, we had to give it a chance. My generals have not been able to understand that." Hitler was scuppered, so to speak, by his spurned love for Great Britain. That day in Brûlis de Pêche, Hitler was very relaxed and happy. The news of the French offer of peace was given to him while standing with his officers on the road between the church and the schoolhouse. He gave himself a lively slap on the upper thigh, and his laugh of relief carried to us two secretaries. A little to one side we watched the scene as Walter Frentz filmed it. Then Keitel gave an address in which he hailed Hitler as the greatest warlord of all times. Hitler visited the trenches where he had served in the First World War, finding them to be exactly as he remembered them. Later he went to Paris to see the Invalides Cathedral, the Opera House and other buildings. After his return, he claimed with pride that he knew his way about their corridors better than the guides did. During his youth in Vienna, he had made a thorough study of its ground plan and had retained all the architectural details in his head. A few days later, Dara and I were taken by a Wehrmacht driver, whom Oberst Indibisi Schmundt had placed at our disposal, to Brussels, where we were involved in a minor accident. It was nothing serious, but Dara was thrown against the car roof and suffered concussion. I found her a hotel to change before our return a couple of hours later. Hitler heard about this accident and banned us from riding in Wehrmacht cars. He showed such concern for us. It was a good relationship and one felt protected, even at the beginning of the Russian campaign before much changed. At the outbreak of war, I had a large trunk made with compartments for the office material and stocks of headed stationery. These had the sovereign emblem, eagle with swastika, and the words De Führer below it in gold, while the private notepaper had Adolf Hitler instead of De Führer. There were also cards with the same design. Since we were now constantly at FHQ, Hitler wanted us to wear uniform. On Hitler's directive, the president of the Guild of Stage Designers, Benno von Arendt, designed for us a costume in Italian officers' grey cloth with gold buttons and cord trim. In place of the round party badge, Dara and I wore on the left lapel the silver sovereignty emblem designed by Hitler himself and cast by goldsmith Otto Gar. It consisted of a slim eagle clasping a swastika in its claws. Permission to wear this badge was granted by Hitler only to a chosen few. Even later, Benno von Arendt visited Hitler frequently at FHQ and also received invitations to join the evening tea sessions. Hitler would talk with him about the artists they knew. When Arendt left, Hitler would always shake his hand warmly and say, "I am glad to have you visit me from time to time in my loneliness. You are for me a bridge into a better world." Letter, Berghof, 22nd of February 1941. We have been continually on the move since 23rd December 1940. Christmas on the French coast, Calais, Dunkirk, etc. On 23rd December at Boulogne, while at dinner in the dining car of our special train, the British bombed us and our flak roared back. Although we were sheltered in a secure tunnel, I had funny feelings. I have already told you about Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, where the mood was less than pleasant. The 6 days I spent in Paris with Schaub, Dara and Kempka were free of duty. We had almost too many invitations from the German embassy and the staff of General Hennesse, and scarcely had time to come up for air. We should have arranged for a rest day afterwards. That would have made it better. Probably we will not be staying up here too long. At the moment Daranowski is resting, I am here with Johanna Wolf. Since we shall be spending the whole year sitting in the bunker with nothing to eat day after day but thick pasty stew, I would like to take the cure at Niederlindenweis, even if only for 14 days. Up here we have an unpleasant thaw with gloomy overcast sky. The boss is in Munich today, and so it is really desolate. Letter, Berghof, 7th of March 1941. I am pleased your holiday was so harmonious and that you were able to be with so many nice people. I think it would also be good for me to spend a few weeks with normal people, therefore I really do envy you. One should also definitely maintain contact. By being so cut off from things I feel lonely, dull and ossified. It is time we went back to Berlin. We have been here long enough. We shall be in Berlin probably mid-month. At the moment, it looks as though I shall not be going to Niederlindenweise. Now we have to be immunised against cholera and typhus. This happened before all our big journeys. Well, if I cannot go, I accept it. War is war. I have just heard today of the heavy work the women have to do in the bomb factories. It makes one feel quite insignificant. I hope you received my letter from Vienna. We went there on Saturday for the signing of the Bulgarian Pact. On Sunday we were travelling, and I could not call you. Meanwhile, we had a hefty snowfall, which spoiled our spring mood. I do not think it will settle long. It is too wet, and the sun is trying to break through to melt it. I am returning Lav's letter to you with this one. He does not seem to be very satisfied, but this pessimistic undertone you find in all his letters. Rather skillfully, he sent me a few short lines directly through a business friend who visited him there. He seems to be very disappointed not to have heard from me. He ought to be able to understand the problem in itself. But of course he knows nothing about the OKW and Gestapo investigations. And if you have not passed on my aquamarine ring, I would be glad if I could hold on to a memento of Bruckner. Imagine it, Wernicke was also swept out with another colleague in the whirlpool of clearance and reorganisation. I did not hear of it until he had already gone. Nothing surprises me anymore. We are all sitting on a powder keg. Letter, Berlin, 28th April 1941. I was hoping that the boss would not come back so soon. On this last journey he gave Wolfen a rare outing, but now he has arrived and probably we will be off south again in the next few days. The 14 days when I was alone in Berlin simply sped by. Gretel Slezak secretly married 3 months ago without her parents' knowledge. He is 6 years her junior, a conductor who composes heavy and light works, has a terrific temperament, and is in the Luftwaffe. She is happy, looks years younger, and keeps advising me to do the same. All I am short of is somebody suitable. A short while ago, I got from Elav a small packet which somebody sent me in Berlin of his behalf. Ahrens at FHQ forwarded it for me to Niederlindenwiese, and now I have received it by this roundabout route. It contains 12 socks and a kilo pack of tea with the note, on behalf of Herr L.A. with warmest greetings. No date or other message. Probably he will have handed it over in February. I expect it will be the last sign of life from him, for now he will scarcely dare write. Owambo has now finally cleared out his room this week. I kept him company and got the last bits of information I was missing. Also the certainty that in our circle there is nobody who will lift a finger to help if one falls into disfavour. I was very sorry for Owambo. Apparently nothing military has been arranged for him. He is completely in the dark. Nobody amongst his comrades who once sent him photos signed in undying friendship will have anything to do with him. And here I mean those who were once degraded themselves. But that is all forgotten. It is disgusting when people are so selfish and have no sympathy for the sufferings of others, and do not even have the will to imagine what it must be like in the other's shoes. Well, there is still much to be said about it. Damn, now I have to stop. They are laying the table. The boss joins us for coffee every afternoon. Letter, Berghof, 20th of May 1941. The boss left today for Munich. I have stayed behind. As my friend now needs money, she decided to sell the handwritten poems by Dietrich Eckart, which he had sent to old von Wolzigen. I mentioned this to the boss, who was very close to Eckart, and no sooner said than done. He bought them for 10,000 RM. An amount like that M would naturally not have got anywhere else. The war with the Soviet Union began on 22nd of June 1941, and next day we left Berlin after making brief preparations. On 28th of June, I wrote to my friend from the new FHQ Wolfschanze, 8 kilometers in the woods from the miserable little town of Rastenburg in East Prussia. After 5 days here at HQ, I can give you a short report on morale. The bunkers are dispersed through the woods, divided up into work sections, every division set aside for itself. Our dormitory bunker is the size of a railway compartment and has light-coloured wood panelling. There is a discreet wash basin, above it a mirror, a small Siemens radio with a wide choice of stations. The bunker even has electric heating, not yet connected up, eye-catching wall lamps and a narrow hard mattress filled with eelgrass. The room is narrow, but all in all, it will have a nice look once I have hung a few pictures. Common shower rooms are available, but until now, we have not used them. At first, there was no hot water, and as usual, we slept in until the last possible moment anyway, because the noise from the fan in the bunker disturbed us, and the draft passed continuously above our heads, which I always hate, especially because of the rheumatic pains I have so often. We requested that it be turned off at night, with the consequence that we now sleep in a fug and suffer all next day from a leaden heaviness in the limbs. Despite that, it is all fine except for the damned plague of biting midges. I have midge bites all up my legs, which are now covered in thick swellings. The anti-midge precautions last us only a short while. The men have better protection than we do. Long leather boots and thick uniforms. Their only vulnerable spot is the neck. Some wear a mosquito net all the time. I tried it one afternoon, but it becomes a burden after a while. If we spot a midge, the hunt for it starts immediately. The awful biting midge plague did not leave Hitler unaffected. He said that they had searched out for him the swampiest, most climatically unfavourable and midge-infested region possible. Nevertheless, he had not yet lost his humour at that time, pointing to difficulties in jurisdiction, and concluded, after all hands went for the midges, in this work only the Luftwaffe is competent. Actually, in the initial stages of the Russian campaign, I found that Hitler was nearly always good-tempered and ready for a joke. One night after the usual tea hour at Wolfschanze ended, it always followed the military situation conference and was attended by one personal and one military adjutant, one medical doctor, and 2 secretaries. Hitler accompanied us to outside the bunker doors. There we stood chatting for a while in the darkness. Blackout was always strictly observed. Suddenly I realized that I had left my flashlight in Hitler's room and asked the manservant to fetch it. He returned empty-handed. Where could it be then? I said. Hitler, in jovial frame of mind, defended himself with a smile. I have not stolen it. I may be a thief of lands, but not of lamps. And it is better that way, for they hang you for the little item, but for the bigger one they let you go. Letter. FHQ Wolfschanze, 28th of June 1941. Some wirefly swats have arrived, and whoever is free has to join in the great midge hunt. They are saying that this is only a smaller breed, and by the end of June an even more unpleasant kind comes, and the stings will be even worse. God help us. However, I am pleasantly surprised by the temperature. It is almost too cool in the rooms. One has to dry out the bed first by body heat. It always feels damp. The trees deflect all the heat. Just how much one realizes only when in the open on the highway. Then the heat hits you. Now for my busy schedule. Shortly after 1000, Dara and I go to the officers' mess bunker, dining room 1, an elongated, white-painted room set quite deep in the ground, so that the small gauze-covered windows are quite high up. The walls are decorated with marquetry. One shows Hütten, the other Heinrich the One. A few days after moving in, a captured Soviet flag was fixed to the wall. In this room, with seats for 20 at the table, the boss with his generals, general staff officers, adjutants and doctors eat at midday and evenings. At breakfast, we two ladies join them. The boss seats himself so that he can gaze at the map of Russia on the opposite wall, which naturally spurs him into new monologues about Soviet Russia and the dangers of Bolshevism. He must have suffered very much in the period after the signing of the so-called Friendship Treaty with Russia. Now he speaks of his fears from the heart, always emphasizing the great danger which Bolshevism presents to Europe, and that, had he waited another year, it would probably have been too late. Recently, he said in Berlin during the usual coffee hour, which he takes daily in our room, that Russia seemed eerie to him, rather like the ghostly ship in The Flying Dutchman. In reply to my question why he always insists that this was his most onerous decision, namely to proceed against Russia, he answered, "Because one knows next to nothing about Russia, it might be a great soap bubble, or just as well be something else." The beginning has been so promising. In the first 2 days at Wolfschanze, Dara and I even attended the military situation conferences when the improvised sessions took place in the mess. So we heard the boss, standing by a large map of Europe and pointing to Moscow, say, "In 4 weeks we will be in Moscow. Moscow will be razed to the ground." Letter FHQ Wolfschanze, 28th June 1941. Yes, now I have wandered completely off the subject. Therefore in the morning we wait in dining room I until the boss, coming from the map room where he will have received the situation report, arrives for breakfast, which, by the way, consists of a cup of milk and a peeled apple. Easily satisfied and modest, isn't he? We girls, on the other hand, cannot get enough, and after wolfing down our allotted portions, small pat of butter, deftly exchange the cutlery, so that we get 3 portions instead of 2. After that, we let the boss explain the new situation to us, and afterwards attend the General Situation Conference at 1300, which is held in the map room where reports are made by either Oberst Schmundt or Major Engel, Army Adjutant. These reports are extraordinarily interesting. Statistics about the enemy aircraft and tanks destroyed are delivered. The Russians seem to have enormous masses. Up to now they have lost over 3,500 aircraft and 1,000 tanks, including heavy 40-tonners. And the progress of our troops is demonstrated on the map. It is made clear how furiously the Russian fights. He could match us man for man if the Soviets had proper military planning, which thank God is not the case. So, from the experience so far, one can say that it is a struggle against wild beasts. If one asks how it is that we have taken so few prisoners, It is important to know that the Russian soldiers are stirred up by their commissars, who tell them atrocity stories about our inhumanity, which they will experience should they be taken prisoner. They are instructed to fight to the last, and if overwhelmed, to shoot themselves. That is how it plays out, and the following happened at Kovno. A Russian prisoner sent by our troops to a bunker in order to ask the Russians there to surrender was probably shot by the commissar himself for having volunteered to carry the message. After that, they blew themselves up. Better death than surrender. Each unit is controlled by a GPU commissar to whom the commander is subordinate. Cut off from the leadership. What remains is a mob, totally primitive, but which puts up a dare fight. This is naturally a danger in itself and leads to bitter fighting. The French, Belgians, etc. were intelligent and gave up when they saw there was no point in going on, but the Russians keep fighting like madmen, trembling with fear lest something should happen to their families if they surrender. That is in any case what Moscow has threatened. They cannot take advantage of having so many aircraft because they lack intelligence. In the Russian squadrons, for example, the squadron commander leads the way, and the rest follow without knowing the objective. They simply stay on his tail. If he is shot down, they cannot find the way back because most of them have not been trained to read a compass. Meanwhile, as I said previously, we have destroyed 3,500 Russian aircraft. Back to the daily routine. At the end of the situation report, the time passes slowly to lunch, which we take in dining room 2. As the meal is very often stew, we give that a miss, particularly if peas and beans. If we have nothing important to do, we take a nap for a couple of hours after lunch, so that we are well rested for the remainder of the day, which usually lasts into the early hours. Towards 1700 we are ordered to join the boss for coffee, and he treats us to cakes. Whoever eats the most gets a word of praise. The coffee hour usually lasts until 1900, but often longer. Then we go back to dining room 2 for dinner. After that, we have a walk or see a film to kill time until we are invited for tea after the evening situation conference. In Hitler's study, opposite the main windows, was a large fireplace with a round table before it and rattan chairs. As a rule at tea time, the guests of the boss would be a medical doctor, one military, and one personal adjutant, Martin Bormann. We 2 women and Heim, Bormann's adjutant. Heim had been given the task to record secretly the gist of Hitler's talk after the tea session was over. These were first published subsequently under the title Adolf Hitler, Monologe im Führerhauptquartier 1944, 1944 by Werner Jochmann. Here I have to make some observations about Dr. Henry Picker. For a 4-month period in 1942, Picker deputised for Heim as temporary adjutant to Martin Bormann at FHQ. On Bormann's instructions, but without Hitler's knowledge, he had to make surreptitious notes of Hitler's conversation to keep Bormann abreast of Hitler's thinking. Whatever one may think, the monologues, Heim, and the Tischgespräche, Picker, are valuable sources for following Hitler's thinking. Many historians have relied on them in the past, and many will in the future. What they may not know, however, is that a red line must be drawn through the foreword and commentary of Tischgespräche, for it is not true to claim that in 1942 Adolf Hitler gave Henry Picker the exclusive rights to write up the table talks. The facts are that Adolf Hitler had no knowledge of his monologues being secretly noted down. That he did not know, and did not wish a record to be kept, is proved by the following: a conversation between Heim and Schaub after 1945. In the spring of 1951, I met Julius Schaub in the street just after a magazine had published an extract from Picker's Bonn book, which was on the point of being released. Schaub assured me that Hitler had had no idea that I was making notes. B. A letter from Gerda Christian née Daranowski to Christa Schroeder, dated 90th March 1975. You know how he, Hitler, hated having his thoughts committed to paper, i.e. he strictly forbade it. I remember one night at Wolfschanze when, after some highly interesting talk, You said to him something like, "I would like to have got that down in shorthand," and he replied, "No, then I would not be able to speak so freely, etc., etc. Do you remember?" See, Adolf Hitler often said that after the war he would dictate his memoirs to his two senior female secretaries, Wolf and Schroeder. The events, experiences, and ideas expressed in his table talks were naturally the major component of his life story. A signed statement in my possession, made by stenotypist Gertraud Junger, reads, "The worse the situation got at the fronts, in the small circle at the evening table, talks the happier the Führer would be to talk about his plans for after the war. He talked about the painting gallery and reshaping the city of Linz to where he was planning his retirement, and mentioned in this context repeatedly that he would then surround himself only with civilians, artists and academics, and never again with the uniforms, so that he could then finally dictate his memoirs. His two long-serving secretaries, Wolf and Schroeder, would help him in this. The younger girls would probably marry and leave him. As he would then be older and slower, the women would be able to keep up with his tempo." Jetzt. Another myth is that Adolf Hitler allegedly instructed Martin Bormann to give Picker special treatment by ordering that his bags were not to be searched whenever he left FHQ. In fact, the bags of FHQ staff were never searched. Affidavit. I hereby swear on oath that during my service as personal adjutant to Adolf Hitler from 1943 to April 1945, my bags and personal effects were never subject to controls on entering or leaving FHQ. This was true for all other personnel at FHQ. There never was an order to search baggage of FHQ personnel upon entering or leaving FHQ, or Sperrkreise and 2, Führer bunker, and accommodation of Adolf Hitler's personal staff. Upon entering Sperrkreis 4, Führer bunker, after the assassination attempt of 20th of July 1944, visitors from outside were required to surrender their pistols to the RSD, and their hand baggage, file and attaché cases was examined. Signed Otto Günscher, 26.3 of 1982. To rebut all of Picker's false assertions would require another volume. I point out here just three glaring examples. Eva Braun was the lady of the house at the Berghof. B. Eva Braun was Hitler's great love. And C. Hitler broke off his friendship with Gretel Slezak in 1932 because of her Jewish background. All three statements lack any basis in fact and are discussed at length later in this book.